Morning. Not sure who is on.
Good morning, Counselor. I think it's Counselor Flaherty.
I'm on, Madam Chair, just listening to the rest of the call.
Yep, I just wanted to let you guys know the mayor's still finishing up his call, so I've asked that we start at 10:10.
Okay,
Okay?
perfect. I'm going to mute myself now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Lydia.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
She going to send these to get pics for.
Hi, everyone. We're going to give it until 10:10. I see Pam's joined us. So I just want to let people know that I think the mayor might still be finishing his call or give colleagues time to call in.
Mike
The call's
test,
just
can everyone hear me?
call's wrapped up.
Mike test, can everyone hear?
I can hear you, Mike.
Thank you.
Oh, Michael, I can hear you, Mike.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right, so it's about that time I have, we'll just go ahead and get started then. 1 second. Okay. So, all right, I'm formally opening the hearing. This is the Committee on Government Operations. It's Friday, May 22nd, 2020 at 10 a.m.-ish. The docket is 0505, petition for a special law regarding an act regarding the disability pension for Scott O'Brien, Ryan Lenane, Harry Jean, Terry Cotton, Kurt Stokinger, Matthew Morris, and Richard Cintolo. Good morning, everyone. I am City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Chair of the Committee on Government Ops. We are here today for a virtual hearing on docket 0505. In accordance with the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible, the City Council is conducting this hearing via Zoom. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health accommodations. The public may watch this meeting via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-TV. It also will be rebroadcasted at a later date on Comcast 8/RCN 82/Verizon 1964. For public testimony, written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made a part of the record and available to all counselors. This home rule petition would increase, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and,
Oh, we can hear you.
thank you. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. This home rule petition would increase the accidental disability requirement allowance payable to the 7 officers specifically named in the proposal. Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 32, Section 7 governs the accidental disability retirement allowance. It currently allows for a yearly amount of pension equal to 72% of the annual rate of the officer's regular compensation. This proposal will increase the retirement allowance to the rate of compensation that the officer would have received had such officer continued service as a police officer, essentially increasing it to 100%. The home rule petition also provides for the surviving spouse as follows: an annuity in the amount of 3/4 of the amount of the pension payable to the officer per month at the time of his death, or the officer's death, excuse me, if the surviving spouse remains unmarried. And if said surviving spouse remarries, the city shall pay, in lieu of the aforesaid annuity, an annuity of $550 per month. I believe we've been joined by several of my colleagues in order of their arrival. We have Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Sabi George, the lead sponsor of this matter, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Liz Braden. Am I missing any other councilors? Councilor Kim Janey and Councilor Andrea Campbell. I think that's all I have for city councilors. We've also been joined by Pam Kocher. I apologize if I mispronounced your name, Pam.
No problem.
From the,
Thank you.
what's the correct pronunciation?
Coker, thank you.
Coker, thank you. From the Massachusetts Research Municipal Bureau. And we've also been joined by my colleague, Councilor Mejia. So at this point, I'm going to ask my colleagues, starting with the lead sponsor, for any brief remarks or introductory remarks, and then we'll go into direct questions. And I'll explain the standard before we go into questions. So anybody have any brief remarks before I explain what we're going to be doing today? Councilor Asabi George, as the lead sponsor, did you want to say anything briefly?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our colleagues and others who have joined us this morning. We have had a slight adjustment in the plans for the panel this morning. So I know that there are some questions from our colleagues, and specifically Councilor Flaherty had a number of questions in regards to this home rule petition. So if we could perhaps move to that so that we are better prepared for a more appropriate hearing with the 7 officers, Scott, Ryan, Harry, Terry, Kurt, Matt, and Rich, for a later date. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any introductory remarks? Counselor Flynn?
Madam Chair, no, I don't. Thank you.
Counselor Flaherty, I'm sorry, introductory remarks only.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, thanks to the lead sponsor. And I know that we have a lot of new members on the body, and we also have members who may have not participated in these types of procedures before, but there is a process, and there are obviously statutory legal standards that have to be met via the 100%
Counselor Flaherty?
legislation. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, I'll go through the statutory standards and in
Gotcha.
my introductory, but I just want, if anyone had anything to say very briefly.
Yeah, other than
Before we
just
go into-
just other than we're not in receipt of any of the formal packets that we normally get as the longest serving member, and someone has done these probably more than anybody on this Zoom. We don't have so everyone gets a packet. They get a packet from retirement. They apply for retirement and they get the 72%, and then they come to us with the retirement
Counselor-
packet.
Yeah.
And included in that, obviously, is the
Right.
incident report, after actions, affidavits, medicals, and stuff like that. So in order for us to make an informed decision, we need that information, and we just don't have that. So that's my question or concern on my introductory. We have some very worthy
Thank you.
candidates,
Thank you.
but we're sort of we're a little hamstrung here.
Thank you very much. Counselor Liz Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am unfamiliar with these proceedings. I'm here to listen and learn, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Janey.
I'm good.
I just heard from Counselor Campbell. She's good. Counselor Mejia, anything brief?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just here, like my colleague Liz Braden, Counselor Braden, to listen and learn. And yeah, looking forward to doing just that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I turn the mic over to
We've also been joined by Counselor Baker.
oh,
Chairwoman.
yes. Thank you very much. We've been joined by Counselor Baker. Thank you very much, Counselor Sabi George. Counselor Baker, did you have any introductory remarks? I was just going to quickly go through the process.
No, thank you.
Okay, very well. As Counselor Flaherty alluded to, there is a formal process for which a person does seek this home rule petition. Again, this petition is for folks who to go from 72% retirement to 100% in terms of disabilities. First, there's naturally a severe injury on the job, which they would have to show that it happened while they were working for the city of Boston or the municipality. The employee then goes to the Public Employee Retirement Administration Commission, also known as PRAC. That commission establishes already rules and procedures that govern disability retirement. The purpose of the rules and regulations is to establish uniform standards and procedures to be applied by local retirement boards. The PRAC will assess the standard for disability retirement for ordinary or accidental injuries or disability. They look at the following things, or they must make the following findings. The member is unable to perform the essential duties of his position. The inability is likely to be permanent. And if the application is for accidental disability retirement, that the incapacity is the natural and proximate result of a personal injury sustained or hazard undergone while in performance of the member's duties at some definite place and some definite time without serious and willful misconduct of the member's part. And that ultimately the board must find that the member should be retired. They look at several factors to determine whether the inability is permanent. They assess essential, and I can go through those factors as well, but at a later date. But they ultimately, Thank you. You must go through the pre-rack, you must be retired, and then you would come to the city council. And we would assess your injury at certain standards to determine whether disability is permanent, and also to assess whether the person, and I'll read it directly from the statute, excuse me. Whether we would, as a city council, be assessing whether the accidental disability of retirement is the person is physically unable to perform the essential duties and responsibilities of the job, and that such inability is likely or deemed permanent before attaining the maximum age for the member groups by reason of personal injury or violent act injury sustained by a hazard undergone as a result of and while in the performance of his duties. So there's a process as we've walked through. And at this point, I believe the moving sponsor has asked or are any of the police officers here?
So, Madam Chair, I've asked the police officers not to be present today. We do have, I think, maybe a few of them watching at home, and I know some of the members of the Boston Police Patrolmen's Association are watching from home or elsewhere. And I do want to note, though, that we do not determine disability. Disability is determined by both a medical doctor and the retirement board and PRAC, as you mentioned. Our determination here as part of this home rule petition is whether we support making these officers who will be retired at that point, of the 7, our determination is that they should be made whole. And then that is my hope, that these, in this case, all men who were injured in the line of duty, who were shot in the line of duty, are made whole. We have, for example, Scott O'Brien, who on January 16th, 2004, was shot in the jaw, wrist, and forearm in the line of duty. Ryan Lenane, who was shot December 7th, 2013, a gunshot wound to the arm, responding to a call for service, was shot in the line of duty. Harry Jean on August 7th, 2013, gunshot wound to the leg during a motor vehicle stop, sustained life-threatening injuries, career-ending injuries, and was shot in the line of duty. Terry Cotton on August 7th, 2013, along with Harry Jean, shot in the line of duty, unable to work. Kurt Stokinger, January 8th, 2016, gunshot wound to the leg during a motor vehicle stop, resulting in a career-ending injury. Matt Morris, October 12th, 2016, gunshot wound to the leg, sustained a career-ending injury while being assaulted by a suspect who was wearing body armor and ambushed upon arriving at the suspect's home. And Rich Cintolo, also August 12th, 2016, gunshot wounds to the neck and upper torso during that same event. These are all officers who have been either already retired or in the process of being retired, and who have been evaluated by medical doctors, and have almost all of them have already been retired and determined to be retired. We are looking, and the rest, we are expecting that to happen soon. I think there's 2 or 3 outstanding. Medical doctors determine someone's medical status and ability to be retired. I am not comfortable in this format sharing private medical records with a body that have already been determined to qualify as so. My hope is that this body will make these 7 officers whole in their retirement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George. I do have some questions, but I'll just go ahead and go through. So I assume you're essentially speaking on behalf of the officers right now?
I am, because I do not, what I'm hopeful to avoid is these 7 officers who have relived their experiences multiple times, that they don't need to relive this over and over again. So my hope is that we have all the information that our colleague in particular had asked for, all the information that is necessary for this hearing to continue at another point and have those officers with us that day. I also want to note, by coincidence, the day I filed this or brought this before our body as a whole, when I submitted this home rule petition, by coincidence, there was also a home rule petition for assurance that of all of our first responders and first responding divisions, public safety divisions, that were considerate of mental health and physical health well-being. There is significant impacts to each of these officers physically, but there's also an incredible mental health toll that these injuries and career-ending injuries they're also experiencing a mental health issue or an impact on their mental health because of these injuries. And I would like to limit the number of times we're asking them to come before us and relive their experiences and retell the stories of their injuries and share what I think is very private information that has been reviewed by medical doctors, that has been reviewed by a retirement board. So my hope is that our colleagues state very clearly what the information they need is. Counselor Flaherty has done that. And for me to be better prepared with the information that's necessary for a future hearing in which the officers will be present.
Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and turn it over then to each of the colleagues about the information that they need. I will remind folks that Counselor Asabi George is correct. We do not make a medical determination of their disability. What they're asking for is to ask for an exception to the 72% that they would get at retirement and ask for an increase to essentially 100%. And it's a public process of which this body assesses that ask, and then the State House would assess that ask. So, but I'll get to my questions and about the issues of medical records and things like that. But I did want to turn it over to Counselor Flaherty, if you're still here with us. If you could talk a little bit about what information you feel that is necessary for us to continue, and also your own experience with this particular petition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And obviously through the chair and respectfully, this is just not how we do them. There is a process and there's a statutory legal standard that we have to meet as a legislative body where it's baked into the 100% legislation. And so the first thing we need is the exact retirement date of all of the individuals. So their deservingness is aside. Let's just start with the process. So not even questioning the legitimacy of the applications, but let's just start with the process. The very first thing that we need is their actual retirement date where they got 72% and their retirement packet. It's a packet that basically follows this application for 100%. They go to the retirement board, they have a process, they get their retirement granted. They then take that packet and then they come to the Boston City Council. Within that packet, in their application, will be the underlying police report and or reports, any and all after action reports for the event, medical records. There's a department doctor analysis, there's the office's analysis, and then there's a third party mutual advocate or report, if you will. And then in instances, as the sponsor alluded to, there may be some that this event and rehashing is traumatic. They will have either an attorney or a personal representative, or in some instances, it'll be their union. If they're an officer, it's the BPPA. If they're a detective, it's the detectives union. If they're a superior officer, it would be the superior officers union. And those individuals would come forward and make their case before the Boston City Council, but we are absolutely entitled to that documentation. And I've never been involved in a situation granting 100% where we didn't have that information. As traumatic and as serious and as terrific as these events are, it's important that we have that information because we have to make informed decisions. Having the information technically will prevent maybe some of these questions being asked out in a public forum, but so I think this hearing, quite frankly, is just a little premature. Everyone has to be retired first, and then after the retirement, they come with a packet. So I'm not quite sure where these packets are. The offices may have them in their own personal possession, and or their respective unions and or their respective attorneys have those retirement packets. I respectfully request through the chair to the maker or even through the chair that we have those packets, and that 13 copies plus a copy for the clerk and central staff be made available so that we could assess and evaluate each and every one of them on the merits. Again, aside from the deservingness and the willingness, that's the process. And we cannot sidestep the process for anyone for any reason. With the legislative branch of city government, we have a fiduciary responsibility. There are employees in terms of their city employees. We need to be able to vet this appropriately through the committee, and then the committee will issue a committee report. Furthermore, in my experience, we've never lumped them in all as a one or all or none or all. They all have to come forward on their own merits. And so I would also, from a procedural standpoint, we need to identify it. We need to find a way through committee to be able to break these up individually so that we're entertaining them one at a time. So anyways, that's my 2 cents on it. Again, it's just based on my experience. The longest serving member, I've done more of these than anyone. And that's how it is. It's
Councilor Flaherty,
yes,
how
Madam
many
Chair.
have you done? How many have you done, Councilor
I
Flaherty?
think in my 18 years on the council, I think we've probably done 5 or 6. Quite frankly, we've rejected more than we've granted. It's a big deal to my colleagues, particularly the new colleagues, when you're granting 100%. In addition to that, it follows them through their lifetime, plus their spouse will get 75%. And I believe their son or daughter gets preference to go on the civil service list. It's a big deal. Again, and in most of the cases, or many of the cases we've dealt with, they've been deserving. And that's why we have the 100% law that's there. But in order to get to the 100%, there is a process. And that process includes the packet with the information and the presentation, and then we do our work on behalf of the city employees. So I'm confident in knowing the 7 individuals. I know them, many of them personally. I've worked with them as an assistant district attorney. I'm aware of the situation, but we got to kind of dot our I's and cross our T's because we have that fiduciary responsibility for the taxpayer. And I guess I understand that it is traumatic to have to ask questions and to relive situations. That's the process, number one. 2, that's why they have legal or personal representatives and or their respective unions to advocate on their behalf in situations where it would be traumatic to relive that. But nonetheless, we need this information. As you recall, Madam Chair and the lead sponsor, I've asked for this information all week. And we're in hearing, it's almost 10:30, we're 15 minutes in, and I still don't have the packet from the individuals. It tells me one of 2 things. Either A, the individual, there is no packet. And if there is no packet, that means that these individuals have not been retired, that's a problem. They need to retire first. I also see that the retirement board isn't here. That's part of the process too. The retirement board comes to the council and confirms to the council that they've retired the individual at the statutory 72%. I don't see anyone from the retirement board here.
That is correct. I should address that. I apologize.
If we're going to do this, I want to do this right. It's a matter of basic fairness to the officers and their families, but it's also it's our opportunity as the legislative branch of city government to be able to do our homework, get the facts, get the information, make an informed decision that hopefully will lead to these individuals deservingly receiving the 100% benefit. But there's no other way to do this. It starts with them retiring, then getting the retirement packet, then they bring the packet to the council that includes all of this information, the incident, the police reports, the after actions, and in some instances affidavits, and clearly the medical documentation. And then we proceed, and then we vote, and this is the rest of the process. The council votes, and if there's an affirmative vote, it goes over to the mayor. The mayor is then required to review and sign, and then the mayor sends it up to Beacon Hill, and it basically becomes part of a special act. That's the process. There's no way to circumvent it. There's no way to sidestep it. And there's most definitely no way that the council is going to be able to make an informed decision and take a vote without this information. So again, through the chair to the maker, I'm willing to work with whoever. I'm willing to work with the applicants. I can tell them how it works. They should know, their union leadership should know. And again, this is an adversary. We want to be helpful here. We want to get this done, but we got to do it right because it has to pass council muster. It has to pass mayoral muster, and then it has to go up to Beacon Hill, and it has to pass Beacon Hill muster. And if you don't provide this information, and or if it's not a thorough process, we won't meet the statutory legal standard, and we'll be right back here again reviewing additional applications. So that's like 2 cents based on my experience. Take it for whatever it's worth. Happy to work with you as the chair. Happy to work with the lead sponsor. Happy to work with the unions on it. Again, just based on my experience, this isn't how we do them. Unless we're going to create this new standard by which someone just comes forward and we give them the good housekeeping stamp of approval with no information, no documentation, no underlying reports. We don't even know if these individuals have formally retired. And I'm not saying just submitted your application. There has to be an adjudication from the retirement board, and then they get a packet. And the fact that I don't even think any packets exist. So I'd like to hear from somebody that says, hey, yes, they have in fact retired, and here's their packet, and here you go, council. Unless we have that, we're kind of like we're putting the cart before the horse, and we need to hit the brakes and let them retire, let them get the packet, and through their union leadership and or their attorneys and personal representatives come to us, and then we start the process.
Thank you.
Again,
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm sure Councilor Sabi George took notes for what is necessary from Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Flynn, did you have any requested information, concerns, something to provide to Councilor Sabi George? You're on mute, Councilor Flynn.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any requests for Councilor George. I also know many of the Boston police officers and know their situation, their professionalism and hard work, dedication to the city for so many years. So I certainly support the proposal. What I don't want to see happen though is us go forward and then somehow before it even gets to the governor's signature, that it's not approved.
Very well.
So I just want to make sure we do everything we can so that all the paperwork is completely in order, and then there's a smooth transition, and there's no questions that outstanding issues that would hold it up at Beacon Hill. That's my number one concern. But as far as these Boston police officers, because I've known many of them when I worked as a probation officer, they worked with me on different public safety initiatives, community policing. They're exceptional police officers and did a tremendous job for the city. So those are my 2 points, Councilor Edwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flynn. Again, this is to Councilor Braden. Any questions or additional information you're requesting of the officers?
I echo the concerns of Councillor Flynn and Councillor Flaherty. I think having all the necessary documentation and making sure everything is in order before it proceeds would be prudent, in the sense that we don't want to get further down the road and have the whole process stalled because we've missed something. So I will be guided by their level of experience in these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Janey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as president of this body, I strongly echo the sentiments of my colleague, Councilor Flaherty, in terms of having a process that is well-informed by the packets and the documentation that we need. I'm very concerned that it's unclear whether or not these 7 individuals are even retired. I am concerned too that this has been packaged together and the precedent that would create. I don't think that that is a precedent we should be trying to create with this body. I think we should take each individual case and look at the merits. Certainly, I think it's important to support those on our front lines who do this work, and particularly those who get injured in the job. They should be taken care of, but I think it is very important that we have a thorough process, that we vet these applications, and that we make informed decisions. So I would appreciate that. I think in terms of understanding what's happened in past cases, Councilor Flaherty shared his memory of it, but these are public records. And so I'd like to know what the facts are. So over the last 20 years, how many cases were approved? How many cases were rejected? So I'd like to know, like, how many applicants came forward, how many were approved, how many were rejected. I think that we can get that information.
I can commit to that. I don't think Counselor Sabi George needs to. I'll do that.
Yep. And then I think, there are other, I would certainly have, I think, questions based on, the packets and the cases I'd be interested. I know Pam Coker is on this call. I'd be interested in what the financial implications are for each, and not that should lead it. I think the merits of the case should lead whether or not we approve this, but we do have a responsibility. So I think I would want, just as part of the information gathering, I would want to understand, what we are talking about. I think that is it on my end, but I wanted to echo the concerns just around having a thorough process, one that is fair, that is transparent, and that is informed by the information that we need to make good decisions. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, President Janey. Counselor Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the sponsor, obviously, for filing it. I agree with Councilor Flaherty, and I don't think I need to sort of go through entirely what he said, but putting my legal hat on, obviously, these cases involve some level of legal complexity. We all serve constituents. We are the financial stewards of the city of Boston. So, of course, all of our constituents want to know not only the merits of each individual case, but how much it's going to cost, what cases we've done in the past. I know as chair of public safety, particularly when I was in my first term on the council, some of these issues came up previously, and I did go to Councilor Flaherty and other colleagues who had that institutional knowledge to learn more about what the process is. Many of the union leaders have also shared freely about the importance of having the packets and getting that information, which we don't have with us today. So we can't make an informed decision. So looking forward to a follow-up hearing when we have all of that information in front of us. And I do want to stress this point so that we're all clear that none of us on this body have and will ever discount the service of the employees and all of our employees, whether they are officers in fire, EMS, all of our city employees who are dedicated. I often say city employees are overworked and underpaid. And now in the midst of COVID-19, we're really seeing our folks show up, and they should be applauded. We, of course, should express our gratitude consistently and continually. And in these particular cases, these are folks who are working and doing their jobs and suffered injury. And it is sad, it is devastating. Of course, we want to make sure that they and their families get the benefits they're entitled to. And so all of us are on the same page with respect to that. I think what we are not on the same page on is the process piece. And I appreciate you, Chair, and Councilor Flaherty giving us the detail that is needed as to what we need to make an informed decision, and looking forward to the follow-up here. So thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councilor Flaherty, for the detail.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia.
Hi, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to echo the same sentiments. I'm new, so I'm learning this process as I go. So I tuned in just to learn, and what I didn't realize that, oh, Flaherty, you've been on for 18 years. That's you definitely know, you've been around, and do appreciate your leadership in helping us understand this situation. I am curious though, as we continue to go down this rabbit hole, what opportunities exist to also do a deeper dive. I'm going to assume there are a lot of folks who probably don't even know their rights around this. And maybe a lot of other folks in city government who have walked away from the situation because they didn't know to fight for it. So if we're gonna do, if we go down that path, I think it'll be really important for us to ensure that we do a deeper dive and make sure that everyone is getting their fair share, even folks who never even thought to do something like this. I'm just very curious now about the equity piece of it. So, but thank you for bringing us together today.
Thank you, Counselor Mejia. Counselor Baker.
Good morning. I don't really have much to
Okay.
say. Just to Julia's point a little bit, Julia, I think anybody that's this far along in this process is going to absolutely know all their rights around this. Here, I'll go on camera for you.
Yay.
You're going to know their rights around all this thing. I don't think you're going to come up with, like, these seven people that are there. They're probably the only 7 in the city that are going to be available for this, because like if someone's in public works or something and they go out, we're not going to, we as the council, I don't think, are going to escalate like a public works case or a case like that, unless someone fell out of a truck, out of a tree and died like that. Maybe you give the benefit there. I think you're overthinking it. Sorry if I'm sorry if that sounded bad, but
listen, I'm new to this. I don't even understand the whole gamut, but so I do appreciate the feedback. I'm just curious about the process and if it's just one department that is more inclined to do it or what. I'm just curious about some of the lower wage workers.
Well, you probably, fortunately, we only have police members that are being shot at here. Not that there's other ways you couldn't get hurt.
There's also, Counselor Baker, I believe also firefighters could also be applying for this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I
I
think
would
those-
also suggest EMS.
Yeah.
Those places are gonna have union representation and, it's not like this is opened up. This isn't gonna be a lot of this happening. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Madam
Counselor
Chair.
Baker.
Thank you. And thank you, Frank, for that feedback. I'm new and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I turn this over to Counselor, to Pam. Pam, are you still with us? Pam?
Yes, I am.
Before I turn it over to you, I just wanted to give some list or thoughts also to Counselor Asabi George, and then we'll go to hear about the fiscal impact or your opinion on that impact, okay? Just wanted to tee you up so you were ready, okay?
Thank you. I do wonder if, and I of course defer to you, Chair Edwards, whether I should hold my testimony for a subsequent hearing so as not to be not to be speaking at a time that some might seem as inappropriate.
Understood, Pam. I do know that Counselor Janey did have a question about the financial impact. So maybe if you want to withhold your specific testimony about the cases and just talk generally about how you analyze financial impact and that would be very informative. I think, again, we have a lot of new counselors. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go to Counselor Sabi George. You said some of them are retired. Who's retired?
So we have, I don't have the exact list in front of me today because I was anticipating that we were withholding or postponing this hearing. 4 of the 7 are certainly retired and have reached that benchmark. The 3 more recent individuals are in the midst of that process, and the time that this process takes and the time that that process takes, they would need to be retired before we completed this. I think that it's also very helpful to have the almost 2 decades of service that Councillor Flaherty has had to this body's information before us today. I appreciate the feedback, certainly from all of our colleagues, especially those with a few years of experience under their belt to share this information. I would appreciate from Councillor Flaherty through the chair if he could share some of that historical information, the names of police officers, the dates of incident, the dates of retirement. That would be very helpful to have better information for all of us for what I hope is a rescheduled hearing. Also for Pam, I'm happy to have sort of her testimony today. I think that would be more informative for the next hearing when we do have the officers with us.
Thank you. So 4 of the 7 are retired. We don't have their names today. Would it make sense for the next hearing and if it's a matter of urgency, especially to have 4 go on and split up the home roll, because why lump all 7 of them together if all 7 aren't retired? So it seems to me that it would make sense that they, we go ahead and move with the 4 folks who meet the threshold to be before this body.
Yeah, I'm certainly open to that
Okay.
conversation, and we can continue to talk about that. Myself as the lead sponsor, you as the chair, regarding that. It was important to me, this group of officers have spent a considerable amount of time working through this effort for many, many years. Some of them, as we know, their injuries date back to 2004. And my hope is that we will move as quickly as possible to make these officers whole, as they were injured in the
line of duty.
in the line of duty and in service to our city. And for me, when an officer dedicates their life to our city and is injured in the line of duty in such a violent way, that we need to move quickly on it. So I appreciate the feedback, especially from our longest serving member, and will double down on some of the information that he's requested. I am very concerned about sharing personal medical records in this format, medical records that have already been reviewed by appropriate people, so that we can continue to debate perhaps offline, and appreciate the concerns of all of our colleagues. I appreciate the concerns of our newest colleagues, because that I think has led us to, I think, a thoughtful discussion today. But I will say, just for the record, it's something that I'll have to contemplate on my own, perhaps in collaboration with you, Madam Chair, around that medical record piece, because I feel I'm very hesitant to share that, because it's more than, and every single one of these officers have experienced more than a simple physical injury. If it was just the biology behind the injury, that's one component. But the other longer lasting scars that we don't see are the ones that I'm really concerned about exposing in a public forum.
And I just wanted to make clear, I think what you're talking about is PTSD, right? And having to relive a traumatic incident, and having for those folks to have to talk about what happened to them, and how your concerns are valid, that they would re-injure themselves, set themselves back if there's been years of therapy, if there's been years of healing, that they could set themselves back. So I don't want you to feel
about them answering questions is one thing, but also submitting that to the record, it becomes part of the public record.
Right, let me finish, Councilor Asabi-George. So I don't want you to think that I am dismissing that kind of relived pain or that kind of trauma for them and their family, right? So that is something that we absolutely need to weigh. We also need to weigh the process and the concerns. And I want to be very clear, every process that's vetting something that has a burden, if a person is seeking that, regardless of the injury that they have had, it is still their burden to prove something. Now, and that happens for people who have been rape victims, who have to go to trial. Those are for folks who have been injured and have to explain what happened to them, and they're in a class action suit. There are certain issues and concerns. So you have my commitment, Councilor Asabi-George, to do my best due diligence to make sure that, one, they are not re-injured in this process. And I will happily work with you. I will happily work with their union rep and whomever they choose to send on their behalf, if it is such a level of re-traumatization that they cannot testify. That's number one. Number two, in as much as this process requires us to look at documents and understand what is happening to them, there's a third, I don't know what the retirement package looks like. I assure you that they could go through it with their union person and redact the information that they feel is too much for our eyes. I think what would be helpful is, again, having those packets distributed with understanding of redaction. And what we could do is, if we feel that there's certain information that is redacted, we will personally check in with the officer about why that is or isn't redacted before we have a public forum of which they feel they're being put on trial. That is my commitment to you. But I want to be clear, I don't want to set this precedent where there's 7 in a group and where we don't have access to even ask about the information. So that is, I think we're absolutely going to continue this, and we'll continue this. And I do hope the officers or a person in their representation will be here the next time. The retirement board did not, he had emailed before saying that he couldn't make it or wasn't going to make himself available. The retirement board needs to be here to do exactly what Councilor Flaherty said, which is to say the date they retired and at what percentage. And then once we have all of that before our body, I do think it will have to be assessed on an individual basis. So that's my overall kind of thoughts about this. I will now turn it over to Pam. Again, it's up to you. Councilor Sabi George is fine with the testimony, but it's up to you if you would like to present it. And also the process for again, our education, or how you assess this.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Edwards, particularly because I believe you said Councilor Janey might have a specific question. I'd be happy to have that conversation and preface it with a few remarks if you don't mind.
Very well.
So thank you for your time this morning. My name is Pam Coker. I am the president of the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. I am also a city resident. I want to preface my comments today by saying I do appreciate the challenge faced by public safety employees and workers at any type of job who experience a disabling injury on the job and related impacts of that injury on their overall physical, emotional, and mental well-being. My professional background includes work in the occupational health field, including a role interviewing people injured at their job to understand their experience and efforts to get appropriate care for those injuries through the workers' compensation system, which has been a very difficult challenge for many of those folks trying to work through that system to get what they need. And they're already facing a significant physical injury. So I just wanted to let you know I have that background as I speak to this petition for a special law today, purely from a public policy and fiscal perspective as president of the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. Just a couple of quick comments and then I'll talk some numbers and be happy to respond to Councilor Janey. In general, a good public policy is one that addresses a particular issue or problem in a standard way without creating special one-off deals or enhancements for individuals. Second point is the City of Boston's fiscal health is a high priority for the Research Bureau, and employee benefits, including pensions, are a significant share of the city's annual spending, as it is for other cities and towns and for private businesses. Special exceptions to standard policy, such as special pension enhancements for an individual, do make it more difficult to manage the cost of providing a fair pension system of benefits for all employees. And I did do just some back of the envelope calculations about the numbers. I do recommend that you seek expert analysis from the Boston Retirement Board and from the folks at the City Administration's Administration and Finance offices. Just simply looking at the details of the docket at $550 per month in additional pension for each individual. For an individual, that's $6,600 increase in the pension per year for each individual. For all seven, the total cost for a year would be $46,000 and $46,200. And if those benefits lasted for a minimum of 10 years, over the 10 years, the cost of that increased benefit for those seven would be $462,000, so nearly $500,000 in additional cost to the pension system. One thing I'd like to note is that in 2009, then Governor Patrick convened a special pension reform commission to look at many aspects of the state, local government pension system in Massachusetts. They looked at many aspects of that pension system and made a number of recommendations, but that reform commission chose not to look at the state and local government approach to the disability benefit aspect of that system, our existing system at that time. So perhaps rather than continuing to consider individual opportunities for pension enhancement outside of the standard approach of a system. You may wish to consider pursuing with state and local leaders revisiting by the state of that disability benefit system as it exists today. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And did you, again, Counselor Sabi George was happy to receive your testimony. So if you wanted to just, you could email it to us and then we can consider it at a later date. We don't need to go back and forth if it's already written. That would just be helpful, I think, because I believe this conversation is just going to be continued. So you'll be invited to the next one. We would have your testimony. Hopefully we'll have some packets. We have a whole world to assess and then we'll go forward. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
I'm going to ask my colleagues for any, I see, so I got 2 hands for additional comments, but if anyone wants to conclude or again, so just for everyone to understand, I'm going to continue this. We'll come back, we'll have more information. Some people who are retired, we should move them through. Counselor, so I'll go in order again for anyone who has concluding remarks. And we've also been joined by actually Counselor Royo, excuse me. So Counselor Royo, we allowed for opening remarks and also questions for additional information from Counselor Sabi George. Did you have either?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I did, but because it seems like I came at the end, and I'm sorry for that, I had a scheduling conflict that jumped up on me. I'll actually rewatch this, and then if you're going to continue it, I'll have them prepared for that. I did need more information than I received, and so it sounds like that was addressed, and that we may be getting that, not necessarily right now, but the fact that that information is needed was addressed. And so I'll watch the tape, and then I'll get whatever information you add. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go through order of arrival for any concluding remarks, and then we'll allow for the sponsor, Counselor Sabi George, to close it out. Okay, Counselor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and obviously through the chair to the lead sponsor. And I appreciate the work that she's done, obviously, and particularly in the in the mental health side of the house, and she's done great work, particularly around post-traumatic stress. So I understand and appreciate the sensitivity around that, and I empathize with that. But unfortunately, the way that this process is designed with respect to granting 100%, the application and the medical records is public record, and it's public record that's reviewable by the public and the media. And so there's no way to sidestep that, as difficult as it is to say and to even hear the fact that someone potentially has to relive a particular situation as traumatic as what these gentlemen have gone through. I completely understand it, but unfortunately, there's no way around it. And that's why they're afforded the opportunity to have an attorney or personal representative and or to submit affidavits. I remember vividly being on the council when one of the applicants at the time literally came in with a 2-wheeler, and it had like 4 or 5 boxes of all medical records that was made available in the event that a member of the council or the press wanted to ask a question or review some documentation. It's part of the process. It's baked in. These offices know that. They're asking us to grant them 100%. That's a big deal, and they're deserving of it. So starting with the fact that we're not even going there yet. So not even critiquing the applications. Let's just assuming everyone is deserving of that, and we want to appreciate and thank their service. I know them all. I mean, Scott O'Brien got shot in the neck. Detective Harry Jean, one of the nicest guys, a smile that would light up the room. Matt Morris, good kid, good cop, great family. It's like, we know them all. So let's put all of that aside. There's a process, and these offices and the respective unions know that the process by which you get 100% is they have to come forward, they have to retire. Within that retirement process, they're applying for 100%. In that is the medical documentation, the affidavits, the reports. It's all public record. So we're not asking them for anything that they don't know that they have to submit. We're also not asking them anything that they're not prepared, or their legal team or their union reps are not prepared to answer. It's part of the process. So I'll leave it at that. And obviously I want if they're listening, I want them to know how much we appreciate their service to our city. We want them to know we want to work with them to be able to make them whole with respect to the sacrifices they've made, and also the lasting physical and mental health issues that they'll be sustaining for the rest of their lives. And we obviously want to make sure that we're supporting their spouses and their families. That has nothing to do with the sort of the process in making sure that we have the appropriate documentation and verification so that we can do our job as city councilors. That said, through the chair, and I would defer really to Christine O'Donnell, we're in a sort of a precarious position. If we adjourn the hearing, we can't revisit this in the same calendar year per council rules. So we need to make sure that we're recessing, but then we have to find a way to break the 7 into individual applications. And so through that, I don't know if there needs to be individual docket numbers, but I'll leave that up to the chair of the committee, probably working with Christine O'Donnell and obviously the lead sponsor, as to how do we sort of end today with the opportunity to revisit all of these. Because again, if you adjourn, Madam Chair, we're locked out and we can't revisit this until 2021, which would be a huge disservice to the men that we're reviewing now and their families. So I would caution in terms of when you close out, the appropriate verbiage is going to need to be applied. And again, I would defer to Christine on what that language would be. And if we're going to go into a working session, my next procedural question would be, how do we take this docket number, these 7 individuals, and then either assign them, maybe it's A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, or do they all need individual docket numbers? Or do we have to refile? And again, there's some quicksand in there, only because if we refile, it's a new docket on the same subject matter. So again, a little procedural trickiness that we have to adhere to pursuant to council rules, the city charter, and open meeting. And I'll defer to you as the chair, but I think that we may want to
We're going to, yep. I thank you so much. We're going to just continue the conversation. This is not adjourned. We're not ending it. And I believe we can have as many hearings about a topic. I do agree that working with the lead sponsor, Councilor Sabi George, as we committed to before, looking at those who are ripe and ready to move on with their claims before us, those who are formally retired, we can go through. But before we go, before I end this, I will have Christine O'Donnell answer your questions formally. But I just want to make sure we get to the other colleagues. Okay, Councilor Flaherty?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's fine. And I'm done for the.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your historical perspective as well. Councilor Flynn? He may have already jumped. Councilor Braden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no other questions at this time.
Councilor Janey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to reiterate, I think the importance of having a thorough process, as you've heard from other colleagues, think it's very important that we have the information needed to make informed decisions. So thank you for chairing. Thank you to the lead sponsor. Look forward to continuing the conversation.
Councilor Campbell and Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just had 2 points. One was summed up by Councilor Flaherty on the medical records piece, and this was me putting my lawyer hat on, that unfortunately, when you come through a public process like this with this request, it's going to be difficult for folks not to waive HIPAA. So I hear Councilor Sabi George's concerns around that. So just wanted to flag that piece. And then the second is going back to, I think, Councilor Mejia and Councilor Baker's point. In these cases, specifically with petitions like this, one of the things I think why it's critically important we have documentation and robust discussion is there are other city employees and other constituents that live in our district who are not always happy with these types of cases because they're city employees that get hurt on the job as well. And for their reasons, they want to see 100%, and we know that's not usually possible. And so I just want to raise that up because, we're obviously comparing duties and responsibilities, and I hear Councilor Baker, it's not like, you're getting shot, but people are still city employees, I shouldn't say, but other city employees also get injured on the job. And that has come up in past conversations related to this, why I think it's critically important that we have the most robust conversation so that when we have these conversations with our respective constituents, we are prepared. So I just wanted to flag that because of past conversations related to these cases. Looking forward to the next hearing or working session. And again, to the folks who are watching, including the officers and union leadership, thank you for your service. And my goal, along with everyone else, is to move things along quickly. Thank you. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you. Counselor Mejia, then Counselor Baker.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Counselor Asabi George, for bringing this to light, and Counselor Flaherty for your feedback. I as a new counselor, it would be really helpful to me if there was a place where I can, I know we have the rules book, and I appreciate that because that's how we learn the rules of engagement. But these sort of nuances, it would be good to have some sort of roadmap and guide so that when I come into these conversations that I'm better prepared to understand what is expected of these situations. And so I would ask, and I'm not sure where we would get this from or if I can Google it, but it would be good for me to figure out how I can be better equipped to participate in these things so that when I say something like, I would like to know what other departments are doing, that I understand that it might not be the best comment to make. So just would be helpful to know. And also, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Mejia, Counselor Baker, then Counselor Arroyo.
Thank you. This was actually a good hearing. I think I can speak for myself. I will look favorably upon these. However we move forward. My sense is that we're going to need to split them. I mean, however we go, I understand the commitment that these officers make. And being I'm in my just finished my 33rd year as a city employee. So to maybe talk to Julia a little bit, it's just in asking questions. You have all the department heads available to you. Call them up and ask them questions. Have relationships with them. That's how you learn the city. Every city worker, not every city worker, but when you get in a department, you start thinking about your retirement, and you have all your colleagues, your people in your department. If we were in offices, or I was in the printing department, you're sitting there talking about your retirement nearly all day, every day. So that's how you get information. So reach out to your department heads, set up meetings with your department heads, and pick their brains, because they are in charge of that department. They know everything about the department. And I apologize if I came off as, whatever I didn't mean it like that. I just think that when we look at going to 100% of anybody's retirement, those are long-term commitments. And if that were widespread, if we just weren't thinking seriously about something like this, it's potentially bad fiscal management. So thank you. Good hearing, Madam Chair. This is still very difficult for me to do on camera like this. I'm not a big fan of it. I can't wait to be back in the chamber. So thank you. And Councilor Asabi George, I appreciate your leadership on this one. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
And happy
Thank you,
Memorial
Counselor
Day.
Baker. So Counselor Arroyo.
Hi, not much for me. I got to watch the tape just to see what I missed, but also I appreciate that it's getting a second hearing. I do think when we deal with things of fiscal responsibility, it requires that we be as thorough as possible. So I appreciate that there'll be a second opportunity to really get my teeth around whatever is being discussed and what's being asked for, and get all that information made available. So thank you so much for that. And I look forward to being part of the process. So thank you.
I'll say something very brief, and then I'll turn it over to the lead sponsor, and then we will close out. Thank you very much for your leadership, Counselor Asabi George. I think if anything, we've had a wonderful opportunity to learn a great deal as a body. Because this doesn't happen very often, this is something that we were going to have to deal with, and very likely would have been whoever sponsored this with this new amount of people would have been a back and forth and reassess and figuring out how we're going to move forward under the current laws, because all of us, for many of us, are doing it for the first time. So that I will have to say, I think this is probably likely going to be something that would have been continued no matter who brought it forward and for how many people. So I do appreciate your patience with us learning this process. And I do look forward to hearing from the officers. I look forward to hearing from the union. I haven't as of today. I look forward to talking with the retirement board, if at anything, from my own education. But I do want to echo all of my colleagues' points. This is not a question of bravery. This is not a question of character. This is not a question of dedication to the city of Boston or the hearts of these individual officers in any way, shape, or form. This is us learning the process and making sure it's as consistent, it's as open and transparent, understanding the fiscal implications of a lifetime of 100%, plus very likely the lifetime of their spouses at 75% if they don't remarry. That's not something small, and it's worth taking the time to do it right. So thank you so much in your commitment to do it right with us all and make sure we get those who are retired and ready to moving on through this process. So that's all I have to say. I'll turn it back to the lead sponsor, Councilor Sabi George, and then we will adjourn. Then we will
Recess.
I'll let folks know what our next steps are.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I'm grateful to the question and the concern from my colleagues, especially our longest serving member, almost 2 decades of service to this body, Councilor Flaherty, for his very specific interest and request for information. Certainly his longevity and historical knowledge is really helpful to this process, and I appreciate that. Certainly wish that we had these requests in sooner so that we were ready to go ahead today, because I know dating back to an injury from 2004, we need to move on this, and these 7 officers deserve that. So I look forward to moving quickly, pulling together the appropriate documentation and doing that in partnership with all of you and partnership with the officers that were injured and their representatives. I do want to just note for the record, this is our last formal proceeding before we head into the Memorial Day weekend. So I wish everybody, all of my colleagues, everyone watching at home, certainly those who have served our country and who have been either killed in action, missing in action, or have died after service to our country, that they have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. I also want to note to the chair that we do have a comment from our legal eagle at City Council in the chat box. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I will, thanks for that indication. I will go ahead and read that comment from our legal expert on procedures for the City Council, Christine O'Donnell. Specifically on procedural questions, the process is to adjourn today's hearing, not recess. You can have as many hearings, et cetera, on the same docket as needed. And the chair would only recess for a short period of time and not for another hearing. So we will adjourn today's hearing.
Madam Chair, if I may just interject in just one question, and again through you in the maker, one other option for us potentially, obviously at the discretion of the lead sponsor, we could reject without prejudice so that it can be refiled same calendar year, but they can be refiled individually, which might be a little neater and cleaner, so that we take each officer on the merits oldest, the date in terms of Councilor Asabi George mentioned, some of them are pretty dated. We can either start from the oldest date, or we could start with the more serious ones. But they clearly need to be done individually, not as a group of 7. And one way to accomplish that is we could reject without prejudice, allows the lead sponsor to refile them individually in the same calendar year. Again, food for thought. You can concur again with Christine, but I know that that's been done in the past as well.
Yep. Well, thank you very much. I think what we'll probably do again is continue the conversation under how it is currently filed. And I think at that point, when we're going to go to a working session, or if we're going to get to the point where we are clear about who's going to go forward, who's not, and the lead sponsor is clear with the packets and has the information, then I do think that that is an option that's worth assessing. Thank you so much for that, Councilor Flaherty. I do appreciate that. With that, however, unless anyone has any burning remarks, if Councilor Asabi George has anything else to add, we will conclude today's hearing on docket 0505. Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Happy Memorial Day.
Don't forget to gavel. Don't you have to gavel us out?
That's all I got.
That's good.